Okay, let's talk about something we all just take for granted. What it means to own something, right? It feels like this bedrock rule of the world. But what if it's not? What if the rules of ownership aren't set in stone? And what if we could actually rewrite them to create a much fairer world? Let's dive in.
All right, to really wrap our heads around this, we've got to start with a thought experiment. And fair warning, it's a pretty extreme one, but it's the best way to test the absolute limits of our ideas about property.
Seriously, just picture it. One single person, through some combination of insane skill, luck, whatever, manages to buy up the legal title to everything. Every continent, every mountain, every single beach. It's all theirs. What would that world even look like?
Well, the result? It'd be a global catastrophe. Billions of us would suddenly become tenants, having to pay rent to one landlord just to exist on the planet we were born on. And right there, you immediately see the problem with treating property rights as this absolute, untouchable thing. It's a dead end. So, okay, if that's the problem, where do we even start to look for a solution? Well, we can actually turn to a really powerful idea from the philosopher John Rawls. It's kind of like a master rule for checking if our systems are actually fair. It's this thing called the difference principle. And, at its core, the idea is surprisingly simple. It basically says, look, inequality isn't automatically a bad thing. But, and this is a huge but, it has to pass one critical test. Does it actually help the people at the very bottom of the ladder? Let's break that down because this is key. Step one, a society can have inequalities. Some people can earn more than others. Step two, here's the catch. And step three is that catch. The whole system that allows for that inequality must make life better for the least fortunate person, better than any other system would. If it fails that test, it's just not a fair system. Period.
Okay, so we've got this rule for fairness when it comes to money. But what happens if we take that exact same logic and apply it to the rules of ownership itself?
Well, that brings us to two totally different ways of looking at ownership. On one side, you have absolute property. That's the idea that led straight to our one person owns the world disaster. But on the other side, you've got a Rawlsian view. And here, property rights aren't absolute. They're conditional. They're only justified if the system of ownership benefits everyone, especially those with the least. It's like it has a built-in safety valve against monopoly. And this right here leads to an even bigger, more powerful realization about property itself. We tend to treat it like a law of nature, like gravity. But it's just not. This is a huge shift in thinking. Property isn't a thing. It's a set of rules. It's a social agreement that we, as a society, create and then enforce through our laws. It's not something we found out in the wild. It's something we invented. And because we invented it, well, that means we have the power to change it. And this is so important because it helps us sidestep what's been called the tyranny of total ownership. That's the terrifying idea of being born into a world where every single thing you need to survive, land, water, you name it, is already owned by someone else. A world where you have no real freedom because you're totally dependent on the goodwill of owners just to live. And that realization just naturally leads to this really powerful question. If we're the ones who wrote the rules of property in the first place, doesn't that mean we have not just the ability, but maybe even the responsibility to tweak them or even rewrite them if they're not working for everyone? Now, look, this isn't just some abstract philosophical game. Figuring out the perfect set of rules is, of course, a massive challenge. But just the core idea, adopting this more flexible, conditional view of ownership, it has some incredibly practical, real-world benefits. Think about it. When property rules are designed to make sure everyone gets a fair shake, you get a more stable society. You get economic growth that actually includes more people, instead of just a tiny few at the top. It pushes us to manage our resources in a way that's sustainable for our kids and grandkids. And at the end of the day, it prevents that kind of extreme, destabilizing inequality that can threaten the whole democratic project, all while upholding the basic dignity of every single person. So we're left with this one last thought to chew on. We all live on one planet with a limited amount of stuff. And knowing now that we're the ones writing the rules of the game, what kind of ownership system should we choose? What rules will create a world that's not just productive, but also just and sustainable for all of us? That, right there, is the paradox we all have to think about.